Chapter 103, The Friends, Hanyu's POV. Marcus might have gone, but Hanyu stayed on his knees. He wasn't sure his legs would hold him. Had he been trembling this hard the whole time the awful god was in the room? Lord Theodora crossed the room and slid down to sit next to him. "I don't suppose Felix has mentioned anything to you about doing things my way?" Her way. Murder. What did it say about Hanyu that he didn't balk at the idea? But every time he thought of Antony's back or Asau's finger, the way they both insisted that they deserved it. Hanyu didn't just accept the idea of Felix attacking and killing Marcus. He liked it. "No, my lord," he had to admit. Lord Theodora sighed. "He won't even discuss it with me. Says he needs more time to decide. I think if he'd seen what we have, he wouldn't need nearly so much time." "Probably," Hanyu sighed. "How did somebody who hates killing this much end up as a war god, anyhow?" "You know we're not real gods, right?" asked Lord Theodora. Hanyu shrugged. "Antony says you're not, but I can't pronounce the word he called you. Vimpris or whatever it was. And anyhow, what's a god? Something that can do things normal humans can't. So you're gods." "By that reasoning, you might be the gods, since you can eat real foods and grow your hair out," Lord Theodora argued. "We can't do those things." "Fine then. Something more powerful than a normal human. You can't claim you're not more powerful than us, my lord." Lord Theodora snorted. "Let's go up on a deck together on a sunny afternoon. I think you'll seem pretty powerful next to me then." She was impossible, but she was also making Hanyu feel a lot better. His quivering had subsided quite a bit over the course of this silly argument. "What happens when you go in the sun?" he asked. He knew it was something bad, but he wasn't clear on the details. Lord Theodora seemed more likely to dispense grisly information than his own master. She didn't disappoint. "We start blistering right away. It's horribly painful. You can hardly think or move, but it takes a long time to die." An indulgent little shiver crawled up Hanyu's spine, nothing like the terror he'd felt with Marcus in the room. A little controlled gruesomeness was one thing. The monster who terrorized all his favorite people was another. Speaking of which... "Weren't we talking about Marcus, my lord?" he asked, cursing his inability to stick with a single topic of conversation. "I can guess why discussing agonizing ways for us to die brings him to mind, and I agree wholeheartedly." The sea god smirked over at him. "But actually, we were talking about Felix. You asked how someone so tender-hearted became a warrior, and the only answer I have is that it paid well, and he had a big family. I don't think it's what he would have chosen to spend 1,000 years doing, though." "I can't imagine doing anything that long." Hanyu shivered again, less pleasurably this time. Lord Theodora sighed. "Certainly not losing people, hurting people." She stared down at her knees, which were drawn tight against her chest. Her face wasn't especially expressive, but Hanyu was learning to read it. After all the time he'd spent with her and Chihiro, he could especially recognize sadness. If he'd paused to think about his actions, he would have been shocked with himself. All the priests at the temple would have fainted dead away if they could see him. But Hanyu didn't realize he was going to cuddle up against the unhappy god and wedge an arm around her broad shoulders until he was already doing it. Her head jerked up, surprise dispelling the misery on her face. "Oh, sorry!" Hanyu tensed, ready to yank his arm back and start groveling. "I didn't mean to be presumptuous, my lord. I just..." "No." Slowly, the corners of her mouth tilted up into a smile. "Thank you, Hanyu. I'm very happy that you feel safe touching me." That was true, he realized. He'd worried about her becoming angry with his forwardness. He hadn't worried for an instant that she might hurt him. It just wasn't within the realm of possibility. "Makes me feel like we really are friends, no matter what you call me." She nudged him a little with her shoulder. "Actual friends, not just co-conspirators." "Not that I don't enjoy whining about Marcus with you." "I guess you need more than spite for a friendship," Hanyu said, his tone more questioning than observational. He honestly wasn't sure. He'd always had friendships of lifelong proximity. He was new to building them from scratch. I guess, she agreed. Makes for a perfectly good starting point, though. Really, though, the starting point had been her kindness to Kenta and Chihiro, and the way she fussed over Hanyu and treated him like a real guest when he came to her home. Or at least what he imagined a guest would be treated like. He'd never been one before. Since we're friends, she said, after a moment, I should probably let you know that I don't especially like being touched when I'm upset. If you need a hug or something to make yourself feel better, that's all right, but it won't really help me. Oh! Hanyu did withdraw his arm, not to abase himself and beg forgiveness as he'd first planned, but just to offer a sheepish smile. I'm sorry, my lord. It's fine, she smiled back. You didn't know. Now you do. So, shall we... Hanyu never learned what she'd been about to ask him about, because just then he heard the door slamming and a frantic voice calling, Theo! A breeze and she was gone, the curtain swinging in her wake. Hanyu scraped himself to his feet and came to the main room just in time to see Hiseo gesticulating wildly in the sea god's face. There's a boat, the older man sputtered. A ship! I think it's another of the gods. Another of your kind's vessels. Hanyu couldn't see Lord Theodora's face, but he was shocked by the desperate, fragile note in her voice when she breathed something in a language she didn't know, then whispered, Could it be Titus? Lord Titus, fiercest of the three, Antony's little brother, who had played in their mother's courtyard and helped to rescue Valerius. Titus, who Antony hadn't spoken about in weeks. He keeps his fears close to his chest, Hanyu realized. Asao was like that too. He never liked to talk about the things that worried him. The more he feared something, the more he pretended it wasn't happening. Now that he understood this, Hanyu felt sure that Antony must have been extremely worried about his brother all these weeks. Hiseo was nodding. I think so. Oh, gods, Lord Theodora sounded half-strangled. I have to tell Antony. Bring Hanyu after me, will you? Hiseo was quiet as they rushed through the halls of the ship, and for once, so was Hanyu. He couldn't stop thinking about Antony's face when he talked about his brother and sister. Am I going to get to meet Antony's family? Is Lord Titus all right? Why hasn't he written to Antony if he's all right? What if something's happened? Is he dead? What will happen if he's dead? I don't know enough to help Antony through something like that. When they reached Marcus's door, it was immediately obvious that the news had been shared. Lord Theodora was clutching Antony's hands, the two of them staring at each other with so much mingled hope and dread that it was painful to look at them, and Marcus was gently rubbing Antony's shoulders. Hanyu wanted to yell, "Get your hands off him!" He also wanted to slink away and try not to catch the big god's attention. But this was about Antony. He needed to stay in control of himself. Even when Marcus's gaze settled on him with a strange, new intensity, Hanyu held his ground. It wasn't until Hiseo dropped to his knees at his side that he even remembered that they were in public and he should bow. Hanyu, Marcus smiled, dimpling obnoxiously at him. I'm so glad you caught up with us. Come on, let's get out of the hallway. Marcus tried to usher Antony back into his room, but the smaller god shook his head and stayed rooted to the spot, his eyes still fixed on Lord Theodora. I'm going back to our rooms, he rasped. The sun won't go down for a few hours. I can't... There's time to... Oh, God, should I tell Claudia? Lord Theodora pressed her lips together. Maybe not until we know something for sure. She'd just worry, and it would drive her mad not knowing. Antony gave a low, raw laugh, and Hanyu wished he could hug him, but Marcus was looming behind him, and Hanyu couldn't quite bring himself to crawl any closer. We'll know soon, darling. Marcus pressed a kiss to the top of Antony's head. Could a person die of jealousy? It wouldn't have been so bad if it were anyone else, but Marcus did not deserve to kiss Antony. Marcus didn't deserve to kiss anyone. Marcus turned back to look at him. Come on, Hanyu. We'll all head to your rooms. He might be too proud to say it, but he needs you. Antony finally broke his eye contact with Lord Theodora to toss the awful god a fond, grateful look, and this time Hanyu was too shocked even to be jealous. What the fuck is he up to now?